A joint statement released by the US government has called for the safe departure of the tens of thousands of foreign nationals and Afghans trying to flee Kabul as it falls to the Taliban.
Well, chaotic and distressing scenes there this morning. We're joined now by the Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey. Good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. I mean, you know, it is a dire situation, isn't it? There's no doubt about it, what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. What do you think should be done? There seems to be a clear decision that we're not going to be able to go back in. What are the options, do you think?
It's dire, it's dreadful, it's shocking, and the scale and speed of the Taliban advance, the strength of the Afghan forces and government were clearly badly underestimated by Western strategists. Now I think the first priority is to make sure that we get all British nationals out safely, and all those who have helped work with our forces, to whom we owe such a debt, out safely from Kabul. And so the recall of Parliament's important for that. Not all of the 600 troops that were promised last week have yet arrived in Kabul. So we need to know how that evacuation is going, how secure the staff that are working on it in Kabul are, and also whether there are options about getting people out first and processing them somewhere else, rather than trying to do it all in Afghanistan. And then the second thing that must be done, and this must be done internationally, through the UN, the G7, NATO, is to build the international coordination to try and make sure that the gains in Afghanistan over the last 20 years aren't lost, that aid can continue to flow, and that Afghanistan again doesn't become a haven for terrorism and international extremism. And at this critical time, I'm afraid British foreign policy leadership seems to have gone missing in action.
I mean, how is that possible to do, though? I mean, we've been there for 20 years. Gains were made. People lost their lives. There have been many, you know, former service people waking up this morning having suffered life-changing injuries that will be looking at this and thinking, what the heck was all that for? It's all very well to say we need to build coalition. We had that, and we pulled out. Why did we do that? Did we just not understand the situation? Did we have bad intelligence? Or did we just not have the political will and think enough's enough, time to pull out?
Well, first of all, you know, the forces that have served over the last 20 years, more than 150,000, the families of more than 450 personnel that lost their lives will be deeply upset. Some are angry. They want to make sure that we may be withdrawing from Afghanistan, but we're not walking away from that country and all the gains that have been made.
But we are. We are, John. We are doing that. That is the reality. That's what we're doing. We've seen scenes of one of the things that those people that served there and us as a nation were proud of is the huge gains made for the opportunities for women, a change in attitudes for young girls having education. We're seeing scenes of shots being whitewashed, where there are women on the front. There's a beauty parlour there because they know that the Taliban will not like that. So they're preparing for the worst, and you can't blame them. So we are leaving that. It's too late, isn't it?
It didn't need to be this way. We could have had a graduated withdrawal that reacted and reflected the circumstances on the ground. We are where we are now. We have to get all British nationals and those that worked with our people out safely. That's the first priority. Then we need to look at what we can be doing, and we can be doing a great deal more. We haven't used our position as president of the G7 group to build any sort of international coordination or consensus. We've let the commitment of regional partner countries like Russia, China, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, which was there when NATO took over the Afghan mission in 2003. We've let that drop. We could make sure, first of all, that there is very clearly a threat to the Taliban, that we will track any human rights abuses, we will issue sanctions, and we will pursue anybody responsible.
But they're not going to worry about that, though, are they? I mean, you talk about building international coordination. All of these things take time. Isn't it action now that's needed? We've got to the situation where we have done at the moment. We see the scenes right across Afghanistan of the Taliban taking over. I mean, would you be saying troops should go back in? What steps can actually be taken to help the people in Afghanistan right now?
Of course, this takes time, and some of this should have been done already. There's no evidence that it was. And what we need to hear on Wednesday, there is a foreign policy plan in place. This is far from the withdrawal we wanted. It's far from what we would have wished or expected. But the real challenge now is, how do we make the best of what we've got? How do we help lead international efforts to secure the gains over the last 20 years, put pressure on the Taliban not to abuse human rights, commit the atrocities we saw before, make clear there's action that will follow if they do, make sure aid continues to flow, and that'll have to be an international effort as well. But we could start by restoring the 50% cut in the UK aid to Afghanistan this year, at the very time when the Afghan people wanted a sign that we were not walking away from the country. And finally, we need to make sure that we have a plan to ensure that Afghan doesn't return to being a haven for international terrorism. And
OK,
finally,
but what was the plan when we went in under Labour? Was there an exit plan, and has it not been followed?
Well, 20 years ago when we went in, and I backed that action when our Labour government took that decision. It was in the aftermath of the 9/11 bombings. Al-Qaeda was successfully executed those attacks, planned and trained and run from Afghanistan. They were planning other attacks against other capitals. We had no alternative. Mullah Omar, in charge of Afghanistan, would not hand over the Al-Qaeda terrorists. We had to go in after them.
That was the reason for going in, but you don't go in without an exit plan. So what was the exit plan, and has it not been followed? Because it's all very well now for Labour, you and Keir Starmer saying we should have done this, this and this. But what was the plan back then?
The planning going in was to deal with Al-Qaeda, stop it becoming continuing to be a base for international terrorism, and then help to rebuild Afghan society with an element of democracy.
But how do you then get out at the end of it?
And that's what's been happening. What's been missing, especially over the last 10 years, is any effort for a withdrawal plan. And this was brought to a very sudden, abrupt head by the Trump agreement with the Taliban 18 months ago, and then Joe Biden's decision as president to set a very firm date with an unconditional withdrawal.
But essentially what you're saying is 20 years ago, though, there wasn't actually an idea of the exit plan. There wasn't a strategy for saying, this is what we want to do, and this is how we will remove ourselves and leave the country to govern itself at the end of it.
We went in with a very clear purpose. And when you take that sort of action, you then have to build and develop your plan for withdrawing. What we made then, 20 years ago, was a commitment that we would not walk away from the people of Afghanistan. We've got to try and secure the gains that have been made. We've got to make sure that the lives that have been lost, all the work that's been put in, the sacrifice of our troops, our diplomats, our aid workers have not been in vain. It is not hard. It's not easy. It's going to be incredibly difficult in the circumstances now. But Britain must play a leading role internationally in coordinating those efforts.
It's the how, though, John, isn't it? We'll have to leave it there, but everything you're saying, I think everybody would agree with. It's just not clear on the how. It wasn't then, it isn't now. But Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey, good to speak to you this morning.
Thank you.